Nations, like their people, are very picky about their food, and some countries have very strict regulations governing exactly what people can consume. These nations may limit the availability of certain products for cultural reasons, or because what is considered safe at your corner store might not be considered that way elsewhere.
Mr. Dante! I need an ambulance at the Quick Stop!
So, today we're going to take a look at food laws and rules in other countries. Before we get started, be sure to subscribe to the Weird History Food channel. After that, please leave a comment and let us know what other legal food fights you would like to hear about. Okay, food court is now in session. If you've ever read the classic Victor Hugo novel Les Miserables, or seen the Broadway musical or subsequent film adaptation starring sad Wolverine, then you know that the character Jean Valjean was imprisoned for stealing a loaf of bread to feed his hungry family.
Stole a loaf of bread. My sister's child was close to death.
That's pretty whack. His unjust imprisonment is an indictment of a legal system that criminalizes poverty, which contributes to the story's theme surrounding the French Revolution. And whether it's because they're more sympathetic towards the hungry or just trying to avoid angering people to the point of overthrowing the government, it seems the good people of Italy agree with Victor Hugo. In 2016, the country's highest court ruled that starving people can steal small amounts of food necessary for their survival. The court issued its ruling on a case involving an unhoused man who stole $4.50 worth of cheese and sausage from a store. So, not exactly the Italian job. The guy was just trying to stay alive. The court stated in its ruling that the defendant wasn't guilty of a crime because of his condition and circumstances at the time of the theft. Prove that he took possession of that small amount of food in the face of an immediate and essential need for nourishment, acting therefore in a state of necessity. Might be time to move to Italy. Since the dawn of human civilization, philosophers and kings have contemplated a single question so fundamental to the human condition that it transcends the particulars of any specific time or place. Is a sandwich if it doesn't have bread? The question is now particularly relevant in Ireland, where the sandwich chain Subway has operated since 1998. After 22 years, however, an Irish court ruled that the bread Subway uses cannot be considered bread, as its ratio of sugar to flour far exceeds the legal limit. In other words, as a matter of Irish law, Subway's bread is actually more of a confectionery, literally a candy. Of course, the people at Subway have their own opinion on the matter, because no restaurant that made its fortune on eating fresh wants to leave their customer base thinking they can slap a slice of turkey between two Snickers bars and get the same experience. A spokesperson for the sandwich chain responded to the Irish court's ruling by saying that Subway's bread is, well, bread. According to the chain, we've been baking fresh bread in our restaurants for more than 3 decades, and our guests return each day for sandwiches made on bread that smells as good as it tastes. If they sound offensive, they should be. If their bread isn't bread, can their sandwiches really be sandwiches? And if they're not sandwiches, then what the heck are they? Condiment delivery systems? Oh wait, that's every sandwich. It has been firmly established that there is a scientific link between sugar and obesity. However, the knowledge that too much of something is bad for you has never been a great deterrent. It's why people can still call in sick the Monday after the Super Bowl.
Mommy's not okay.
As a result, many public health initiatives have had to focus on encouraging people to consume less sugar in a bid to promote healthier eating habits. Particularly concerned about its high obesity rate in children and desperate to reverse the trend, the nation of Chile took a fairly unconventional approach. It forbade companies from advertising high-sugar, high-fat food products directly to kids. A ban that squarely covers sugary cereals. What this means in practical terms is that cereal boxes in Chile can no longer feature cute cartoon mascots like Toucan Sam, Tony the Tiger, or the Trix Rabbit. Whoever happens to be on the Wheaties box is probably still fine, though. And, as it turns out, Chile wasn't the only country that suspected the cartoon mascots on cereal boxes didn't really have their children's best interests at heart. In 2021, Mexico implemented a similar ban on cereal mascots in the hopes of lowering obesity rates and making that particular food less desirable to children. So of course, the big question is, did it work? Well, the jury is still out on that one.
How can you be positive about anything?
But for what it's worth, one 2023 study did conclude that the regulation's impact on childhood obesity was negligible. Guess all you can do is let them eat Honey Smacks. People often develop lifelong eating habits in childhood, which is why it's so important that kids are taught the right habits and not standing in the pantry eating room temperature pickles habits. At the end of the day, it's far easier to learn good habits when you're young than it is to unlearn bad habits when you're old. You don't want to know how many pickles we go through for each weird history episode. That's why French schools have banned ketchup from cafeterias, because the condiment is known to be particularly high in sugar. The 2011 ban was part of a bid to curtail unhealthy eating habits and embrace ones that were more in line with French norms. Because in France, good eating habits aren't only about healthy living, they're also about preserving the French way of eating, which presumably involves a lot of frowning. That being said, officials did relent on one small but important point. Schools can serve ketchup once a week, but only alongside fries. Because what kind of monster wouldn't let a kid put ketchup on fries? Little Debbie snack cakes are a childhood staple for many Americans, and an adult staple, if we're being honest. Being able to buy your own box of oatmeal cream pies is the reason most of us got jobs. Among the company's most popular treats are Swiss rolls, which are tiny fudge-covered chocolate cakes with sweet cream swirls. They're little logs of deliciousness. Unfortunately, for those looking to experience its deliciosity, the soft and sugary prepackaged treats aren't welcome everywhere. For example, Norway and Austria outright banned the sale of Little Debbie Swiss rolls. Why? Well, it has nothing to do with the sugar content or any kind of feud with the people of Switzerland. The problem is with some of the artificial dyes in the rolls, yellow 5 and red 40. Although the US Food and Drug Administration isn't worried, because America doesn't ban food unless it's carrying a weapon, other countries are more concerned, citing evidence that these and similar colorants may cause cancer over time. For this reason, Austria and Norway have banned all products containing the dyes. No word on what Tiny Deborah herself thinks of the ban. Few things can ruin your afternoon more quickly than stepping on a wad of old, sticky gum, except stepping on it with your bare feet. In fact, gum is such an efficient day ruiner that lawmakers in Singapore implemented a unique law prohibiting stores from either selling or importing chewing gum back in 1992, the same year as the infamous Bubblicious riots. Okay, so there were no riots, and the law wasn't really about people stepping on gum, but it did have to do with the gum's fundamental ability to be annoying. According to The Guardian, the trigger, apparently, was the havoc that gum could cause on the country's extremely expensive new underground system by covering the door sensors or simply making a mess of the seats. In other words, they didn't want a bunch of Bazooka Joe literally gumming up the works of their new subway. And if you're thinking this is some sort of nuisance law that results in a ticket or a small fine, we've got some sobering news for you. The punishment for illegal gum trafficking can include a fine of up to $100,000 and up to 2 years in prison. Oof! If they ask you what you're in for in that situation, just make something up. However, apparently not everyone was on board with the extremity of the gum ban because in 2004, Singapore eased some of its restrictions. They decided to allow stores to sell gum products that could be used medicinally or therapeutically, such as nicotine gum or certain sugar-free gums. And while a pack of Nicorette isn't as fun as Big League Chew, we suppose it's better than nothing. Just about the only thing more French than making royalty a few inches shorter is making a deliciously crusty baguette. In fact, they're among France's most beloved symbols, next to the Eiffel Tower and Euro Disney. And as such, the country has put great effort into regulating its baguette making. In 1983, France launched its Décret Pain, or bread decree, which outlined what bakers can and cannot do when making baguettes. And the rules are pretty strict as far as bread laws go. First of all, traditional baguettes can only include 4 ingredients: wheat flour, yeast, salt, and water. They can't contain any additives or preservatives, which means they'll only last about 24 hours. That creates something of a ticking clock scenario for bakers, because the baguettes have to be made at the same place they're going to be sold. This may feel like legal overkill to some when it comes to bread making, but France's stringent baguette regulations have paid off. In 2022, UNESCO added French baguettes to its cultural heritage list. Psh, lucky. America has been trying to get Funyuns added for decades. Like pretty much the rest of North and South America, Mexico is in the midst of an obesity epidemic. In fact, an estimated 32.4% of the Mexican population qualifies as obese based on body mass index. According to many experts, diet is at the root of the problem. Diet and trade laws. You see, obesity rates rose in the wake of a 1994 trade deal between Mexico, Canada, and the US, which flooded the country with food that was both inexpensive and less nutritious.
NAFTA will tear down trade barriers between our three nations.
3 cheers for progress! But since 2020, Mexico's efforts to promote healthy eating have included warning labels to help consumers identify unhealthy food products. Of course, when Mexico decided to add the label to Nestle products, which tend to contain high sugar levels, Nestle lobbyists attempted to pressure the Mexican government to forego the warning labels. But Mexico officials held firm, and now the Quick Rabbit has to share packaging space with a sobering health warning like a pack of cigarettes. Many countries implement strict biosecurity measures at their borders to protect their ecosystems and agricultural industries.
I can't let it through as a quarantine concern, okay?
This enables them to keep out any insects, fungi, bacteria, viruses, pet rocks, etc. that could be harmful to crops and livestock. Australia has particularly stringent measures in place, thanks to the country's infamous history with invasive species. Someone introduced rabbits to the land down under back in the 1800s, and they've been wrecking havoc ever since. You'd think the dingoes would get them. Australia's strict rules even include what food you can bring in. Overseas travelers are warned that Australia has very strict biosecurity procedures at its borders to prevent the introduction of harmful pests and diseases. Certain food items brought into Australia, even small amounts or ingredients for cooking, need to be declared. The rule is so serious that passengers can't even bring airplane food with them past customs. Not that you'd want to. Any country would probably consider that an act of war. Breaking the rules isn't taken lightly. A seemingly inconsequential mistake can earn you a stiff fine. In 2022, 2 travelers incurred heavy penalties for failing to declare food products. An Australian woman was fined $1,800 for forgetting to declare her Subway sandwich, as was a backpacker with McDonald's in his bag. Oof, that's an expensive McMuffin. So what do you think? Which of these rules and regulations surprise you the most? Let us know in the comments below, and while you're at it, check out some of these other videos from our weird history.